Hi, today is September 18th, and we're here with Republican LaSalle County State's Attorney Karen Donnelly, who is running for re-election in the November 3rd election. I'm Tammy Sloop, Shaw Media Regional Editor for LaSalle and Bureau Counties, and we also have News Editor Derek Barkeller with us. Thanks for joining us today, Karen.
Thank you very much for hosting me, Tammy and Derek.
Sure. Let's start out. Can you tell us about yourself and why you're running for re-election?
A little bit about myself is I started out in the legal profession as a legal secretary for about 35 years. I was a legal secretary, and at one point I finally realized that I could probably do what my bosses were doing. So I decided to go to law school much later in life. I did it kind of a little bit backwards because I had my family first. I married my husband Rich in 1989, and in 2 weeks we'll be married for 31 years. And I had 2 children, and when my youngest child was in high school, I decided to go to law school. So I would drop her off at St. Bede, and then I would drive up to Northern. And when I applied to law school, I was told by the dean of admissions that he was letting me in because he didn't think I'd make it. He said, you're an older learner, you haven't been in a brick and mortar school for so long, so I don't think you're going to make it, but I'm going to give you a shot. Well, I considered that a challenge, and I was going to prove him wrong. So I went to Northern Illinois and spent 3 years there in law school, graduated cum laude, finished, and when I walked across the stage to get my diploma, he was waiting at the end to congratulate me. He said he couldn't have been any prouder to see me succeed. So I like challenges. After law school, I then went on to work for George Mueller, who I worked for as a legal secretary for 30 plus years. And I went into private practice with him where I did a little bit of divorce work, I did some collection work, and my interest in criminal law started in law school. I had a wonderful professor that made me very interested in all aspects of criminal law. And during that time, I was friends with Mr. Town, and I sought out an internship with him, which he graciously gave me. And I worked for him for 2 years as an intern. The first year, you're considered just a basic intern. And then after that, I was what's called a 711 intern, where I can do trials and the like under the supervision of another attorney. And it really piqued my interest at that time that is what I loved. I loved being in the courtroom. I loved trying the criminal cases. So I decided in 2015 that I was going to run for his office. And I did, and everybody told me then that was another challenge I couldn't beat. But I tried and I succeeded. And I think I've done a lot of good things during that time that I would like to see continue in my next term.
Okay. Experience has been a common theme in both campaigns. Can you speak to how important experience is to the Office of State's Attorney?
Well, everybody always talks about experience. I know that was Mr. Town's mantra, and now it's Mr. Martin's as well. Experience matters. I know I've had 4 years experience in that state's attorney's chair. So I am the experienced one to sit in that state's attorney's chair. But more importantly, I think the characteristics of a good prosecutor is not just experience. It's doing the right thing, it's integrity, and it's the courage to always stand by your convictions. And I think that's what I've done. So experience in what? What is it you want experience in? I've got experience, my whole life experience of being honest, being a good daughter, a good mother, a good role model for my children, a role model for my grandchildren. So it just depends on how you define experience and what you want experience in.
Okay.
What are your short-term and your long-term goals for the office?
Well, I'd like it to be a short-term goal, but as we saw with drug court, it's probably going to be a long-term goal. One of my promises before I took office in 2016 was I wanted to start a drug court. It's taken almost 4 years to get here, But just 2 days ago, we had our first admission. We pled somebody into drug court. So we are up and rolling now. My goal in my next term is to start a juvenile drug court, because as we all know and see every day, drugs start much younger than you would assume. And our juvenile division, they couldn't be more thrilled to hear that I want to start a juvenile drug court. Other goals, I want to continue decreasing the budget. I would also like to work with my domestic battery division, our misdemeanor division, to see if we can't craft some type of domestic battery diversion courts. Because a lot of times when offenders get these marks on their record, they lose their jobs. They lose a lot of things that don't necessarily play out in real life. You don't understand that when a woman goes and says, you know, he beat me, he did this or that, not that I would ever downplay what happens to the victim, but if this couple is going to stay together and make things work, and if the husband loses the job because of a charge like this, that's very important, and we want to help. So diversion courts are going to be a thing of the future with our criminal justice reform, and I want to work with some of the leaders in the community to see how we can do that.
You mentioned domestic batteries. We've seen in some of our other markets that they've been on the rise during COVID. What trends have we seen during COVID?
The trends we've definitely seen during COVID is the juvenile crime, abuse and neglect. Not so much the kids committing the crime, but abuse and neglect. Parents, we are taking more children away from parents because of issues with drug abuse and the like. And we are also, like I said, we do see an increase in domestic batteries because there's just not a weekend that goes by we don't have Sunday court with 3 or 4 different people with domestic batteries. And we are having a slight problem with that because somebody that provides domestic battery services in this area, they are stopping those services. So we will only have one provider. And that's something that we need to look to and see what we're going to do, because when people come in with domestic batteries, they have to get what's called a risk assessment to see what level risk they pose to not only the victim, but to society at large. And with one of these people going out, you know, and leaving this practice, we have to somehow fill that void, and we're looking for other people to help us with that. It's a shame. I don't think this was ever an intended consequence of the pandemic. And of course, you can't predict what happens with something like that. But we are trying to be proactive in how we're handling all of this. Just as we're doing with the COVID outbreak at the jail, we didn't foresee that coming, but we are working to deal with that quickly and to make sure that not only the inmates are safe, but also our deputies that work in there.
Okay. Derek, I think you have a question.
Yeah, and since you touched on it, I mean, do you believe that LaSalle County and the state should aim to reduce incarceration rates? And if so, what policies or practices would you pursue? I know we started talking about that a little bit.
Well, I do think that the way of criminal justice reform and what I've seen as far as the jails and the prisons, they are severely overcrowded. And it doesn't matter whether it's during the pandemic or just a regular period in time, they're overcrowded. And one thing I did when I was in school is I had the opportunity to tour the Pontiac Correctional Center. And I was just shocked at what I saw. I had a great professor at IVCC, Dr. Rebecca Donna, and she took us down there on a tour. And I think everybody should tour a prison to see what it is. And not that I'm a bleeding heart and everybody should be free. I think violent offenders should be the ones that are behind bars. And I think people who are capable of rehabilitation should absolutely be rehabilitated and put back into our system so they can become productive members of society. I've preached that all along, you know, especially with drug court. But as far as where we're headed, both statewide and nationally, I think we are looking at different ways to cut down our jail and prison populations. But that's up to our legislators.
Yeah. Well, what's your position on cash bail? Do you believe it needs to be reformed, and if so, how?
I don't necessarily believe that cash bail needs to be reformed. Right now, it's discretionary with our judges. So we make a recommendation to the judges and they use their own common sense and set it where it should be. Typically, bail is used to assure a defendant's, continued appearance before the court, and it's also to assure public safety. I haven't seen any issues where our county has failed with regard to bail reform or anybody that's been let out that goes and commits a worse crime. We haven't seen that. We don't let people typically out on ankle bracelets or anything like that. We're very cognizant of what we seek for bail based upon the crime, based upon the criminal history, and based on any risk assessments or anything that we may see. So bail reform, I see where, Kim Fox is for it and she's made strides towards getting that done up there in Cook County. I haven't seen any need for it here in LaSalle County.
Okay. Now, it could be perceived that a state's attorney's job is mostly centered on criminal matters, but the office also handles civil matters as well. Can you speak to the civil side of the job?
We do a lot of civil work. George Mueller and Mark Anderson of my office do a lot of the civil end. And what that is we do a lot with the county board. We do the insurance trust. We do committee meetings. We do anything. We do child support. We go downtown and we do child support cases. And I can tell you that we have increased our capability in enforcing child support laws because my secretary, Amanda Donovan, did that when she was in private practice with Mr. Mueller and myself. So she is very well versed in the forms and the procedures required to get child support and get people the money that they're not getting. So anybody who gets public aid or any form like that, they come to us and we get their child support for them. Other things on the civil end, Mr. Mueller and I sued the city of Spring Valley to get back the $573,000 that we feel Mr. Town improperly sent over there during the SAFE time. That is something that I'm very comfortable doing civil work because I did it before. I'm comfortable doing appellate work because I've done it before. And I'm comfortable going to the Supreme Court because our brief was let in on the SAFE case. We petitioned the Supreme Court as amicus and we got in. So whatever the job needs, we do. If there's anything special you're referring to, Derek, about civil matters, please feel free because there's a lot. There's a lot of civil, there's a lot of criminal.
Yeah. And earlier this week, your opponent spoke to us about the importance of the state's attorney's office giving the county board legal advice. He inferred a snafu with the auditor referendum should have been something that the state's attorney's office protects against. What was the case there?
The case there was, according to the statute, our job as state's attorney is to answer questions of the county board. Does that mean we counsel them? Does that mean we tell them what they're doing is right or what is wrong? I can tell you that I did a memo on how to put that on the county board agenda, how to get that passed, how you do it. Mr. Olson and I sat in telephone conferences with Tazewell County, who tried to do the same thing. We talked to one of their board members down there. We got advice, we got guidance, and I wrote up a detailed memo thoroughly breaking down how this is done. I can't make the board follow my advice because this isn't the first time they haven't taken my advice. But all I can do is counsel them. I can't advocate and I can't govern. All I can do is provide advice. And since taking office, I have found a lot of practices that weren't followed, basically that were almost to the point of where they were illegal as far as county contracting and the bidding procedures. We have rectified that, we've corrected that, and we just found out this week something that was handled in another committee was done wrong, and they said, well, we've always done it that way. Well, that doesn't mean it's the right way. And again, what they were doing was illegal, and we have to correct that practice. It's a fine line between asking for guidance and advocating or governing, and that is not our role. We are there simply to answer their questions, and what they choose to do, they're the governing board for the county and they take that action.
Okay. Switching gears slightly, and you touched on drug court a few moments ago. LaSalle County's drug and mental health courts were granted state certification this past spring.
Yes.
which was a campaign goal for you in 2016. Where are we at with these programs? How do you believe they'll benefit the community, and how will these programs be sustained financially?
When I said I wanted a drug and mental health court, the first day I took office, I was called into Chief Judge Ryan's office, and he said, Karen, you want a mental health court? You want a drug court? That's fine. You know, we'll give you court reporters, we'll give you judges, we'll give you the courtroom. We won't give you the money. I said, okay. So I knew that I was on my own and I had to find the funds, either by going to the county board and asking for the money from them. And I know, having worked there for 4 years, that's not an easy thing to do. So I started off writing for a federal grant. We didn't get that. Found a state grant, wrote for that, got it. So the money's there. We have been assured, as long as we do everything right, A, B, C, D every year, that this grant will always be there for us. It pays for the court 100%. It pays the salaries of our drug court coordinator, and it pays the salaries of a probation officer. So there's just no money coming out. It pays their salaries and their benefits. Any traveling that we have to do as far as conferences or continuing education, it pays for all of that. It pays for prizes for the participants. It pays for a lot of different things. We have excess money in there. I also contributed $50,000 from my drug forfeiture account. And that was the account that, if you recall, in 2016, that Mr. Town was using that to travel on, and instead I've used that money to seed our drug court. The sustainability, like I said, will come from that grant. One of my goals for the next term would be to set up a 501c3 corporation, not me personally, but finding somebody out there willing to do that, where we can have fundraisers and get even more money. And I also got a rather large donation into that. I got $50,000 from one individual and $250 from another. So we've received private donations as well. Now, how drug court helps individuals is it brings you into a very specialized courtroom. We are in that courtroom once a week. We meet as a team. We have the public defender, myself, we have the probation officer, we have the drug court coordinator, we have Judge Rakulia, who runs the drug court, and we have Libby from North Central. She is our treatment provider, and we have Jason Edgecombe from the jail in there. And we will meet once a week, and we will discuss the different clients that are in the program. And we have to watch what we term these people. We don't want to call them defendants or drug users, anything negative, because we want to call them participants, clients. And we will have them in court, and they have to do A, B, C, D. Did you go do this? Did you go do that? Did you attend your counseling? You know, did you do a good drug drop this week? And if they do everything, then at the end of the session, and we do this in a collaborative effort, you've got all of the people, all of the offenders that are all in the courtroom, and we can take up to as many as 25. So you've got 25 people in there, and families are invited. If they want to bring, you know, wife and kids, we welcome all the families, but we have little prize boxes that we went out and had a good time buying things for the kids, buying things for them. And it's just the little things that they get excited about, because some of these people don't have these things. Body wash, poofs, you know, shampoos, soap, candles. We've got coloring books and toys for the kids. So we reward them for everything when they're doing it right. We impose sanctions if they're not doing what they should do, but best practices shows that sanctions should be used, you know, as minimally as possible, because then we make what's called a therapeutic adjustment. You know, okay, well, maybe they can't get to counseling because they don't have transportation. Well, let's try making it once every month instead of once a week. How it saves the community is it keeps these people from going back into the community and reoffending, because a majority of the crimes are based on people stealing to support a habit. Retail thefts, people are, you know, high or on drugs when they're going out committing retail thefts, burglaries, car invasions, you know, batteries. So you look at all these crimes together, and these people are substance users that are screaming for help, and they'll go out and they'll steal to maybe sell something to get their drug money. But in the end, the cost of this program will far surpass what the expense will be for people to be in the jail and house them in the jail. So it's a huge, huge savings in lives, in money. And you've got to remember that this is somebody's brother, this is somebody's sister, this is somebody's father, and we want them to return to their families whole so they can get back and work and support their families. And part of the program is we're going to help them find housing. We're going to help them find jobs. We're going to help them apply for insurance. So we're not just walking you out the door at the end of this saying goodbye, good luck. We are going to make sure they have the tools they need to succeed. And then once the case is over and they've done everything that they're supposed to do in each of our 3 phases, they are released without a conviction on their record.
Okay. So that grant funding, you have to reapply for it every year? Is that an
Yes.
annual thing? Okay.
Yes, and we've already done it twice now because our first grant was for a planning grant when we worked with the AOIC on what are best practices, what do you need to see from us? And then the second grant was the implementation grant. And they've assured us that this should be an ongoing, no problem grant every year.
Okay.
Can you tell how excited I am?
Yes, but it's the state that's telling you to count on it, which makes me a little nervous.
And if the state somehow fails us, I do have my forfeiture account. We do have a way to make it happen. And I think once maybe the county board sees how well we're doing, and if we talk about how much it's taking off the jail budget, if we lose our funding, the county board could say, you know what, we'll take that money from the jail budget and put it towards the drug court.
What is your response to those who criticize your office for losing or having cases dismissed in high profile cases? Including...
Oh, I bet I know the cases you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I know you knew the question was coming, so.
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about cases and losing cases, as a prosecutor, if you don't lose cases, you're not trying enough. And a prosecutor's job isn't just a conviction rate. It's not just something, numbers that you tally up. I've got this many years of people in jail versus I have this many. It's the fact of doing what is right and the courage to try the hard cases. And I've done that. I've tried the hard cases. If you're talking about Cusick, you have to remember, coroner's jury found that there was cause to believe it was murder. The grand jury found enough to go forward. I survived a directed finding enough to move forward to give it to the jury. In the end, 12 people didn't believe it. If you can convince 12 people in a room to all order the same topping on a pizza, good luck. It's very hard. We have a very hard burden, and rightly so, because we are seeking to take away somebody's liberties. So we have a very high burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and we have to convince 12 people. So I don't have any hesitation. And I believe Mr. Martin believed it was a murder too, because I've got the affidavit from when they exhumed the body. And it states they believe there was criminal conduct on behalf of Mr. Cusick. And to sit around and think you're going to wait for him to confess, that's not justice, not at all.
Mm-hmm. In the other cases too, former state's attorney Brian Town and the auditor Jody Wilkinson, how do you respond to criticism that you spent too much time prosecuting former and current public officials because they said you had an axe to grind?
I didn't have an axe to grind. Mr. Town was my friend. He dated my sister-in-law. I spent time with him. I worked for him for 2 years, but I can't let things go and get swept under the rug. That's not justice either. Everybody is treated equally under my watch. We all get the same thing. If that had been my sister or George Mueller, a good friend, they would have gotten the same thing. There was no axe to grind whatsoever. When I took office and found what I found in the records and the bookkeeping and everything, had I looked the other way and said, I'm not doing anything about this, then I'm not doing LaSalle County any service as their state's attorney. Did I spend a lot of time on that case? No, I didn't spend a lot of time on that case because it was given to a special prosecutor right away. So that that's really a non-issue. Mr. Town didn't get off because he wasn't found, or he was found not guilty. He was released on a technicality, and the special prosecutor was the one who dropped the ball on that. I had nothing to do with that. Do you want me to address Wilkinson as well?
Sure.
If you'd like.
Yeah, on that case, that was an issue where we had two of her employees say that she put time on their timesheets without their knowledge or permission. They filed a grievance through Mr. Martin, my opponent, stating the same thing. Now, when we went to trial on that issue, we got before the grand jury. We passed it through a directed finding. So 2 points in this game where somebody could have said, there's not enough. The state has filed some frivolous action. There's nothing there. That never happened. We went before the judge, and Judge Jans ruled that he didn't believe Tori Artman when she testified, that she didn't know what she was making when she opened up her, because they made a claim that she didn't know, what her paychecks were because she never opened them. Well, I'm sorry, but when you're an auditor of the county and you don't know what you're making and you don't look at the numbers, I have a problem believing that. And the judge did as well. And when, Ms. Wilkinson was called, and that, the system worked as it should. I tried the case. She was found not guilty. It worked as it should have worked. Do I agree with the judge's decision? No. Do I agree with the jury's decision in Cusick? No. But that's what justice is. I may not agree, but the system worked. And again, if you're not trying these cases, you'll never know. I'm not out there for 100% conviction rate. And of course I will be remembered for these cases. But to me, if you look the other way and do nothing, that's a flaw. That's a character flaw. And I'm just not going to be accused of sitting back and looking the other way and doing favors for the good old boys. And because I tried Wilkinson, LaSalle County now has its first ever fraud and abuse policy that includes specific language that they can't falsify timesheets. We never thought we'd have to get to this point, but it's brought us here and it's now in effect, so it will never happen again. I sent a strong message. We had Ms. Artman get on the stand and testify that Jody falsified her timesheets. We had her telling her union representative that Jody falsified her timesheets. She told two separate officers that she falsified the timesheets.
Can you talk about some of your successes in the courtroom?
Well, 2 weeks after I won the election, I got called for one of our bigger murder cases in LaSalle County, and that was the Carl Leonard case from Streeter. And I got the call from Mr. Sticka, who does all of our murder cases, and he said, Karen, we've got your first murder. And 2 weeks into the job, I said, okay, well, now what? He said, well, we begin. Let's go over to Streeter and let's look at the evidence. So it was like 4:45 on a Friday night, and I said, okay, let's go. So we go over to Streeter, we go into the home, we're with ISP, we are with the Streeter police, we've got crime scene investigators there, and I got my first real taste of what evil people do. There was an 11-year-old boy that was sodomized by this particular defendant. I knew this was going to be a tough case for a little boy to testify. What happened? He found his mother dead, and he was sodomized and had to run to his neighbors in a very cold day in just a t-shirt. But he escaped and he was safe. And one of my proudest moments is when this young boy, when we were prepping him for trial and trying to see how he would do with testifying, he was scared to death, just absolutely petrified. And I have, like I said, 2 dogs. And so I was showing him some pictures of my dogs. I'm like, look here, look at, here's my puppies. And he told me about how much he loves dogs and he's always wanted a puppy. So something clicked in my head, and I know a friend of mine, Julie Condi, has a therapy dog. So I thought about calling in the therapy dog just to come in and play with them to get him more comfortable. Well, then I did some legal research about using therapy dogs in the courtroom, and I found a statute that provides for the use of a therapy dog when a witness is testifying. I wrote a motion. and it was heard before Judge Bercouli, and she granted the request. It was the first time it's ever happened in LaSalle County. And I had young up there on the stand with a puppy in his lap. The jury couldn't see the dog, but he just stroked that puppy. And I remember when Carl Leonard walked out for the first time, because this young victim said, well, I have to see him. And I said, you will, but just look at me and talk to me. Well, when the defendant walked out, he had lost a lot of weight before we went to trial, and he had shaved all of his facial hair off. And the first question I had to ask was, do you see him in the courtroom? And I don't know how he did it, but he pointed at him and he said, that's him right there. And I don't know that there was a dry eye in the place. It was very emotional. And I think that was one of my proudest achievements, to help this young man testify. And on that case, like I said, if you want to talk about experience, inexperience, I am just out of law school 2 years, and I'm trying probably one of the higher profile murder cases. And I received the longest sentence in LaSalle County's history for Mr. Leonard, and that was 120 years. So I'm very proud of the work, but it's not just me, it's a team. I work with a bunch of very well-qualified individuals who help every step of the way. We are a team. Every case we get like that, we roundtable, we talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, we anticipate what the defense is going to do. And it's never me, I by myself. We're a team, and I couldn't be prouder of the work our team put into that case.
During your opponent's interview with us, he said he would make it a priority to repair broken relationships with law enforcement agencies in the county. Can you speak to how the state's attorney's office works with law enforcement, and how would you describe your relationship with law enforcement?
Well, I am the Chief Legal Enforcement Officer for LaSalle County. That's one of my titles. And as such, we must work with police departments and police officers on a daily basis. We see them every day. I don't know, Mr. Martin can use these vague cliches. I can show numbers. I can show you 75% increase in drug delivery prosecution since I've taken office. Now you tell me how that can be a damaged relationship with law enforcement. I've donated over $25,000 to law enforcement. Within my first month in office, I wrote a letter to each law enforcement agency in LaSalle County asking what their needs were and how I could help. So I used our forfeiture fund, which can be used for drug education. And I asked them, what their needs were with drug education or drug enforcement. And I got letters and I had requests, and every agency got a piece of the pie. I gave everybody money. So we have that to be told. I have written advisory opinions. I have defined certain legal terms for them. I don't know of any state's attorney who has sent out more memos to law enforcement. When the new fine and fee schedule came out, I wrote them a memo explaining how to handle that moving forward. When a new case comes out that changes the way things work, I send them copies and explain what we're doing. I follow up with them afterwards and say, okay, this case has now been taken up to the Supreme Court. I don't know how Mr. Martin can come up with that phrase. He has two brothers in law enforcement, and does sitting around having coffee with your brothers equate to having a good relationship with law enforcement? I don't know where he's getting that. And, maybe some officers will say, hey, we don't have a good relationship with her, or we don't trust her. I'm not here to be their buddy, and I'm not here to be their friend. I'm here to be a professional with them and to make sure they do their job. Because since I've been in office, I've had to prosecute 2 officers, and I hold them to a higher standard, as I should. So Mr. Martin, I can tell you there's 3 different cop cases that he swept under the rug, and I think that's a problem. Is a good relationship hiding things and looking the other way when they do something wrong? I am the first state's attorney that's had a Brady list. And it's something that a Brady list is certain officers that have had different issues, whether it's misconduct, internal affairs, or whatever. But I have to disclose that. If there's a case involving that officer, we, by law, are required to disclose that to the other side so they could possibly be impeached when they testify. So I don't sweep things under the rug. I hold them accountable, and they can hold me accountable. But I don't know that I've got any bad relationship with them. And I can also tell you that after the passing of Deputy Brian Underwood from the LaSalle County Sheriff's Department, I held the first ever law enforcement suicide awareness forum, where I invited members from our legislature to come in and law enforcement and treatment providers to come in and talk about what the awful things are that our officers see every day and how we can work together to help that. You know, do we need to provide counseling services? What does law enforcement need to deal with some of the tragedy they see every day? Because one of the issues was that they were concerned about is if they go to their superiors and say, look, I'm having some type of a breakdown, I can't deal with this, they run the risk of losing their FOID card. And if they lose their FOID card, they lose their job. So I reached out to legislators. What can we do to fix this? And David Welter from Morris, you know, guided us on that. Sue Resin chipped in, and they will work with us to pass legislation to make sure that doesn't happen.
And can you speak to the importance of transparency in the state's attorney's office and how you fulfill that responsibility?
Transparency is critical in our office because of where we've been and where we need to go. Not that I put it out in a press release or anything, but Derek, if you've seen my Facebook page, I show the bank records, not, you know, the actual bank record because of privacy concerns, but we share what we spend our money on. I share on Facebook what I'm doing. I have gone out into the communities and I've asked people, I've gone out there with law enforcement, what do you need? What do you need, citizens? What are you seeing as far as trends in your community? How can we address it? I think I've been very transparent since I've been in office. My office is an open door. I'm there every day. If people have questions, they call. I think I've probably been one of the most responsive on Facebook to answer questions. I answer emails. I answer personal telephone calls. I've gotten emails from people that I've convicted saying, you saved my life by putting me away and I want to thank you. I mean, I don't know as far as what other transparency you're looking for, but transparency is very important, and you have to let people know what it is you're doing. And I can't always, you know, the press doesn't always pick up on what I post on Facebook, and not that I expect them to, but I do have a lot of people that look and they'll see, you know, that I spent this much on that, and well, why did you do that? I'll tell them why. If anybody wants to come in and look at my books, they're an open record. Come in and look.
What's your position on civil forfeitures, and has it changed since you last campaigned in 2016?
Civil forfeitures, it's, again, we're seeing a nationwide trend and a statewide trend where we are trying to get away from forfeitures. And I said when I took office that I wasn't going to do any civil forfeitures unless there was an accompanying charge with that, because a lot of times you can do a civil forfeiture and take away something and never have a crime charged. And that is something that I have stood by. There have been maybe 2-3 cases since I've been in office where the evidence was so overwhelming and compelling that even though I didn't file a criminal charge, we did do a forfeiture. Like if it was just so much money and there was, you know, drug sniffs, you know, the dogs picked up on something, there's been just very minimal times that I've done that. But civil forfeitures, I don't like it. My civil forfeiture account is down more than it ever has been during Mr. Town's time. You know, the numbers got up as high as 275,000. We're at about 56,000. And I am required to report that to my committee every month. I'm on the Law and Justice Committee, and I'm required to report my balance on that every month because that's county money. That's not my money. That's not my fund money. That is something that I share with them every month. And if I spend money, that my committee wants to know about it. And the public is entitled to know too. But getting back to your question, Tammy, about civil forfeitures, it's not my favorite thing to do. And it's not something that we're out sitting on Route 80 looking to do, because I think the more important area to fight drugs is in the communities and not on Route 80. And we've seen what civil forfeitures, you know, has happened, you know, what happens when you do that. Especially, you know, when we had the drug interdiction team, you know, formerly known as SAFE out there and doing the drug interdiction. that's not the proper way. I think the better way is to get into the communities and fight the drugs.
Okay. At this time, we're going to give you the opportunity to talk about why people should vote for you, and if you have any final comments.
All right, I have notes. So please forgive me if I look away.
No, it's okay.
You know, sometimes you like to toot your own horn, and if you don't mind me tooting a little bit.
You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Since I've taken office, like I said, we had a 74 to 75% increase in drug delivery charges since Mr. Town's era. I think that's huge. That is a big number that I was shocked to see when I ran the statistics. I've had a 19% reduction in my budget my first year alone, and I've reduced my budget ever since. This year, I just went through my payroll budget and I'm getting it approved in the next couple of weeks. I've slashed my payroll budget by nearly $250,000. I've brought in $1.2 million in revenue to the county. And I think that is an accomplishment that's money that the county never would have had otherwise. It was through donations, it was through grants. And I just most recently wrote a grant for the Comprehensive Law Enforcement Response to Drugs. Big, long title. I saw the grant out there just for fun. I thought, you know what, I'm just going to submit. And grant writing, I don't know if either of you, it's a chore. It's a lot of different hoops you've got to jump through. I wrote for the grant, and about a month later, I heard we got it. So that is paying for my drug assistant salary now, which is awesome because that takes $98,000 off the books of the county. I have donated over $25,000 to assist law enforcement. I've had community forums with law enforcement. Like I said, we've gone out into the communities, myself and, you know, whatever community I'm in, a couple law enforcement officers will show up and we'll talk to the community. What is it you're seeing? What is it you need from us? What can we do better? I have, at my team, we have talked at schools with students. When there was all the shootings in the schools, we went up to some of the schools and said, we went right into the classrooms. You know, are you guys scared? Are you afraid to be in school? You know, almost everybody raised their hand. So it was very emotional seeing young students fear something they should never have to fear. We've talked to parents about what we're seeing in juvenile court as far as sexting, as far as apps on the phones. We gave handouts to all the parents about what you should look for, these secret apps on the phones. I was asked to do a presentation at different hospitals for employers about the legalization of marijuana and the impact it has on employers. That's a civil matter, and that's something I'm very comfortable addressing because I did do civil work. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation about what employers have to look for, what they do, you know, is it impairment, is it measured, what is it? So I put the PowerPoint presentation out there on my Facebook page and said, anybody's free to share this, please do so. During the COVID pandemic, I had a small business forum that I hosted I had doctors on there, I had different small businesses on there, and I had the Starved Rock business community leader on there to talk about how to open safely, how to do it legally, how to do it within the confines of the executive order. So we work together as a team. This isn't part of my job as a criminal lawyer, you know, prosecutor, but it's part of who I am. And I did this and it was done at night. It was done on my time. So I'm proud of that and what we did with that. When COVID first came out and people were having a hard time paying bills, I set up an email account and I asked different attorneys to assist me in helping provide advice to people who, you know, were navigating unemployment, who were looking for ways, you know, can I get evicted and all of those things. So I did that with a couple different attorneys. I have never taken a per diem or travel expense since I've taken office. When I took office, I donated 2 of the safe cars. I donated 1 of them to Dare to Care, which is an agency that provides transportation to people who are seeking recovery, and this group takes them up to rehabilitation centers to be treated. Another safe car was donated to LaSalle County EMS. I don't give favors or deals. Everybody's treated equally. I've had to prosecute my sister. I did the prostitution sting, and I've had to prosecute, high profile business people. I've had to prosecute fellow attorneys. I have had to prosecute government officials and government employees. Everybody's been treated the same. Everybody gets the same deal. During my time in office, we faced 3 very unprecedented events. The first being the tornado. Then we faced the ransomware attack and also the pandemic. I have worked with the county to correct practices of competitive bidding so that it conforms with the law. Another service that my office offers law enforcement is a tool called Cellubrite, and our investigator is trained in this. It's a phone dumping system where we can retrieve somebody's phone and look to see if there's evidence of a crime on there or anything. So we have the capability for law enforcement to come to us instead of going to Springfield or Chicago to use our equipment at no cost so that we can immediately get them the access to the evidence they need. I am constantly on the lookout for free money through grants or whatever form, and I write willy-nilly, and if we get it, great. Drug court, it's here, no cost to the county through grants, donations, and my forfeiture account. During the auditor case, and when we were going through that, I lobbied for our finance director, Joyce Tucker, to come in. She's very knowledgeable about money and government spending. So she came in, and she has since corrected the practices of the auditor's office in grant writing, because we were what's called red flagged for a period of time because of how the auditors handled our grants. LaSalle County gets between $4 and $9 million in grants. So there is no way we could lose those grants, and Joyce has corrected that practice. I work with law enforcement 24/7. I'm on call. I head up the drug division now, so I am constantly doing overhears. There's just a lot that this job entails, and so much of it is more than just being in the courtroom, being a criminal prosecutor. It is being a human being, I guess is the way to say it. And I hope I've been a good human being.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Karen, for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate it. And Derek, as always, it's nice to see you.
Yeah,
As far as any type of a closing statement, I mean, I guess one thing that I'm surprised you didn't ask is what the differences are between the two of us.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, the differences are probably philosophical and rooted in that. And I believe that I am more towards rehabilitation. My degree, my undergrad degree, was in social and criminal justice. So I studied a lot behind the reasons for people coming into the criminal justice system. It's poverty, it's unemployment, it's lack of housing, lack of food, lack of education. So I understand why people are coming into our system. And I'm looking for ways to address both the social justice aspect and the criminal justice aspect. And I believe that my predecessor and some of his people before me were more interested in conviction rates, and they're more interested in, I don't want to say necessarily, take them, throw them in jail, lock them up, throw away the key. But I think that's a huge philosophical difference. But I also think our priorities are different, because I noticed that during the primary, Mr. Martin had made comments about, the drug court and the expense, and it just can't be maintained, and you've got to get people interested in it. Well, I'm interested in it, and I'm doing it myself. And I think you have to be interested in what it is you're doing and have that level of understanding about what it's going to do to these people when you're done with drug court. I want to see these people succeed. I want to see success. And the fact that I'm being, called out about cases I've tried, and I know Mr. Martin has made it, comments about the expense of me trying cases. Numbers don't lie. I have the numbers. In 2015, when he was in there, trial expense exceeded $60,000. I've never came close to that. And I know he's going to say that the QSIT case cost us, so much money. That's not true. We've never gotten near that number. In 2016, I was at 41,000 for trial expense. In 2018, I'm at 30,000. You can never put it, like I said before, you can't put a number or a price tag on prosecutions, because the minute you do that, you might as well wave the white flag and say, we give up. We're going to let people who hire high profile experts and big lawyers just win the cases, because we're not going to put the money out there. I've never exceeded my trial expense budget ever, and I've reduced it every time, every year since I've taken office. And as far as corruption in LaSalle County, it's here. It absolutely is here. And I ask the questions that make people nervous, and rightly so, because we need to be accountable. This is a time when we're asking people to do less, do more with less. This is a pandemic, and I'm ever aware of taxpayer money and what we can do to help out the citizens, because I work for the citizens. And the fact that Mr. Martin represented these girls who admitted to stealing from the county, I think that should be a disqualifier for him for this office. And the fact that he sued, or he was threatening to sue LaSalle County for $3 million for these two girls. It was a defamation action he was intending on pursuing against LaSalle County, not realizing that the board members are immune from prosecution on this. So there are differences. If you want to look back and go back to how we were, then of course elect Mr. Martin. But if you want to continue doing the right thing and reducing the budget and doing everything you can to stop corruption, then let's go another 4 years. Let's get the juvenile drug court running. Let's get a veterans court running, and let's continue reducing our budget. I think that's very critical, and that's what I hope to do my next term.
Okay, thank you again, Karen. For viewers, just a reminder, the election is November 3rd. There's mail-in voting, there's early voting as well. And please check on the Shaw Media news websites, newstrib.com and mywebtimes.com for full election coverage.